Hello, today we talk about behavioral changes and physiological changes to ocean acidification, and we focus our attention in sharks. Changes in water temperature and other biotic factors may affect the rates of physiological process of these marine animals and their ability to adapt quickly to anthropogenic carbon dioxide absorbed by the ocean. They generally have a high K-select life history strategy, making them extremely susceptible to population decline. In fact, they are considered the most vulnerable class of marine vertebrates. They are in a state of decline globally, with more than one-third of all species threatened by extinction. New global assessment reveals that 31.2% of sharks are threatened by extinction. Atmospheric CO2 concentration has risen above 450 ppm for the first time in human history and is predicted to reach above 800 ppm or even 900 ppm by the end of the 20th century. With the accumulation of CO2, there is a phenomenon called ocean acidification. Ocean acidification refers to a reduction in the pH of the ocean caused primarily by uptake of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. There is an increase in the concentration of hydrogen and bicarbonate ions and a decrease in the concentration of carbonate ions. Remember that approximately 34% of CO2 is absorbed by the ocean.
CO2 affects sharks' physiology through osmoregulation and respiration. We can tell if a shark is stressed from his blood. The primary stress response is the increase in circulating catecholamines and corticosteroids, and the second one is hyperglycemia. Sharks maintain plasma osmolality slightly above ambient levels. After a short exposure to very high CO2 partial pressure, they counter acidosis by hydrogen ion and sodium, and chloride and bicarbonate counter exchanges in their gills. But climate change will lead to long-term exposure, so what will happen? A study by Green and Dulfeld exposed small spotted cat sharks to high CO2 partial pressure for 4 weeks. They found out that sharks buffered internal acidosis via bicarbonate and sodium accumulation, indicating that they can use the same mechanism responsible for pH short-term regulation under near-future CO2 levels. Sharks will tolerate a moderate acidification in the long term better than bony fish, thanks to the use of non-enzymatic antioxidants like urea. This tolerance could also be explained for viviparous species for the development under high acidity condition in the uterus. Despite this compensation, ocean acidification reduces metabolic performance, alters protein activities and function, changes the resting metabolic rate, blood chemistry and the aerobic scope. Studies conducted in Chilioscilum punctuatum found peroxidative damage in the brain, negative effect on aerobic potential, cholinergic neurotransmission, digestive enzyme activities, and resting metabolic rate, and the same results were found for the species Chilioscilum plagiosum. Disruption of the acid-base equilibrium can influence the ventilation rate, which will be lower when sharks are exposed to high CO2 levels. However, higher temperature means higher basal metabolic rates and higher respiratory demands. In particular, ram-ventilating sharks may be more susceptible to ocean acidification than buccal pumping species because having lower internal pCO2 values, they will have larger increase when exposed to increasing ambient CO2 levels.
While many land-living vertebrates rely a lot on their visual senses, for most shark species other sensory systems are much more important, such as their olfactory and acoustic senses, as well as motoric sensation and electroreception. However, the current state of research suggests that ocean acidification also impacts the sensory abilities of sharks. You are probably aware of the fact that many shark species are known for their extraordinary sense of smell, but recent studies have suggested that this sense is impeded in marine environments with higher CO2 concentrations. An experimental study revealed that increased CO2 concentrations in the water impaired the olfactory senses of smooth dogfishes. Sharks that were kept in tanks with higher CO2 concentrations showed an avoiding behavior towards the odor of their prey, as well as a significantly reduced attacking behavior. In another mesocosm study, Port Jackson sharks took significantly longer to locate hidden prey in sand trays when they were exposed to elevated CO2 concentrations, and 2 out of 9 sharks did not react to the introduction of a prey item at all. Effects of ocean acidification on other shark senses are limited, while some studies suggest that with increasing CO2 concentrations in the water, the visual abilities of bony fish will be impaired. This could not be clearly confirmed for shark species. A reduction in the sensory abilities of sharks in response to ocean acidification will have detrimental effects for their preying behavior and survival, and consequently for the whole food web. However, we must acknowledge that there are big research gaps concerning the impact of ocean acidification on the sensory perception of sharks, and further research is needed to understand the effects and mechanisms.
Now we talk about reproduction. Is the reproduction affected by ocean acidification? A lot of studies found no interaction with increasing CO2 and reproduction, but the combined effect with elevated temperature can trigger different responses. All types of shark display internal fertilization. They can vary in the mode of fertilization, ovulation cycle, gestation period, and mating systems, and depending on how long the embryos are retained by the mothers, shark species can be divided by oviparous and viviparous species. In the case of viviparous species, there are 3 major sex steroids: testosterone, estradiol, and progesterone, important to regulate ovarian cycle, as well as other reproductive functions such as pregnancy. It has been seen, for example, in the case study of the smooth-hound shark written by Elisio et al., that there is a relationship between seawater temperature fluctuations and changes in sex steroid plasma levels. This provides physiological evidence supporting the hypothesis that increased seawater temperature can trigger ovulation and possibly parturition and mating events in elasmobranch. In the second case study, we talk about a benthic oviparous shark. His name is Chiliorinus canicola, and it's a small spotted cat shark. His sessile egg cases are found in coastal intertidal zones where they are exposed to variation in temperature and dissolved oxygen level during development. Elevated temperature causes different responses. For example, an accelerated embryogenesis, an increased growth rate and yolk consumptions, smaller body size and mass at hatching, and also an elevated Fulton's condition factor.
The first response of animals to environmental change is expected to be behavioral. Ocean acidification is believed to affect marine ecosystems in multiple ways and at a range of levels, including behavioral changes, even if there is still a huge lack of knowledge in this topic. Therefore, in both tropical and temperate species of sharks, a range of behavioral responses can be altered under elevated CO2 levels. Some changes in swimming behavior and ability have been reported. In particular, according to a study made by Pinto, sharks exposed to high CO2 conditions spend a smaller percentage of their time swimming. This can have a huge impact on migration patterns, predator-prey interactions, hunting behavior, homing ability, foraging, social interaction, and exploratory behavior. These modifications are enhanced by changes in senses performance explained previously. Loss or reduction of learning abilities is among the topics investigated in animal behaviors under laboratory conditions, with, as a result, a loss of capability for associative learning, which has an impact on the ability to detect specific predators. Learning ability is crucial to the long-term survival of animals with long lifespans such as sharks. Henrik et al. Suggested that behavioral tolerance and adaptation flexibility of sharks may help to deal with projected future CO2 levels. One discovery that emphasizes the resilience of sharks is their ability to recover from injury or distress. Therefore, some studies have addressed the potential for transgenerational and temporal acclimation of sharks.
So now a small recap. OA may impact the sensory abilities of sharks and in particular the olfactory sense that can impact their behavior. However, we need other research. Ocean warming and acidification with reduced metabolic performance and ventilation rate. Sharks will buffer internal acidosis by bicarbonate and sodium accumulation. The effect on ocean acidification and the elevated temperature can affect reproduction and trigger different responses that are dissimilar in viviparous and oviparous species. There are various behavioral responses that have been observed, but it is important to take in consideration that they can or are enhanced by anthropogenic noise and vary among species and habitats.